All right. Welcome, guys, to the 5th Annual Interdisciplinary Research Conference. To kick off our first presentation for today is Dr. Tom Chesnes. Please give a round of applause. He's going to be covering the topic of research PBA style.
All right.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's well worth the wait. All right. All right. Well, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you to our organizers, Marcus Brazil, Carol Ann Brown, Dave Compton, all the folks working behind the scenes to put this event on. Thank you for being here as well. I appreciate your time on this busy part of the semester. We'll make some acknowledgments before I get started. A lot of the projects that we'll be talking about were funded by the Palm Beach Atlantic University Quality Initiative Program. A few of these projects were funded by the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin County, and also the Summer Undergraduate Academic Research Program through the School of Arts and Sciences. So I appreciate these organizations for funding my research. Also, a number of apologies to start off. I apologize to the Palm Beach Atlantic Marketing and Development staff, represent there in the back. The use of the billboard, slogans, symbols are used without consent or permissions, and I apologize. I also apologize for my lack of Photoshop skills as well, as some of you have already pointed out to me. So research has come a long way over the last 10 years. We've gone from a handful of professors doing research to a significant number, as we could see from the Enlightening Minds publication. In some ways, we are very similar to other institutions. In some ways, we are very much distinctly PBA style. So as I daydream about the billboard, as you all do, I'm sure, I wonder what a research billboard would look like. And, we could think about this. Certainly, we have our students in their blue lab coats there with flasks and liquids of different colors and smoke and things like that, doing very sciencey things in the lab. That certainly would look like research. We hear, those of you know me, I do field research, and so I have students out in swamps setting traps to catch all types of creepy crawlies. In my mind, that would be indicative of research. Maybe it's the dissemination of results, right? Here we have a rare photo of Dr. Poe without a bow tie. It's kind of like a Bigfoot photo there. Presenting information, with the kind of the stereotype professor hands. I think like this, you're really telling something important, or you're going to strangle your audience. But maybe that's research, right? This dissemination of results. But what if it's this? What if it looks like that point of frustration, where you are feeling overextended? You are feeling like you're in a thankless position. You're dealing with logistics. You're dealing with research assistants. You're dealing with budgets. You're dealing with reports, on top of all the other things that we do. Would this be an image that looks like research? And for full disclosure, I have touched on some of these things in the past. I did give a talk about 4 years ago on research at PBA, snakes and seagrasses and scholars, oh my. This didn't actually even win an award as well. There's the plaque to show that. So I did touch on some of these things and some of the obstacles and some of the positive things that we do here at PBA. And certainly it's been 4 years since that talk, and I'm sure you're probably asking, I'm sure we addressed all the issues that you talked about back then. And I wish I could say, we did address all those issues, but some of them still persist. And what we see is that we are plagued by some of the obstacles that researchers have across the board at institutions all over the world. And again, some of these are more distinctly PBA issues. So here we can see a short list of different obstacles that we can look at that would get in our way of doing effective research. And the first one is funding and resources. In essence, we are lacking in funding and resources. In the sciences in particular, we're still prohibited from receiving public funds. That means NIH, National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation. Those funds are out of reach for us. And those are things that certainly we're working on, but it still certainly causes some issues. If you look at the Enlightening Minds publication, though, we do see some positive trends. We could see the general trend of money for research has gone up since the original talk in 2012. We can see, for example, quality initiative funding has increased by $15,000 from 2012, from 32 grand up to 47,000. So that's very encouraging that we have a greater commitment from the institution towards research. We can also see a general trend of outside gifts and grants for research. And we could see this value kind of hovers recently around $200,000, $250,000 a year, which is pretty modest. To put this in a frame of reference, the project I worked on in graduate school was a study to focus on seagrasses in Florida Bay. That single grant was $500,000. And so that single grant to study seagrasses was more than twice our annual intake of funds for research. So we still, I think, have a long way to go. Certainly we're not an R1 institution and we have no aspirations to become one, but I think we could certainly work on ways to acquire extra funds and extra resources so that we can do our research. But again, we think about this, and there are ways that we can stretch our resources. We can collaborate with other institutions. I know a number of us work with FAU down the street. We work with state agencies, with state parks, with other research labs. And so there are ways that we can pool resources so that we can use and utilize the fruits of other institutions and their ability to gain funds that we can't quite acquire. But also, I think we need to, when we look at the list of publications in the Enlightening Minds publication, what a great cover of that publication. When we look at the list of accomplishments, we got to think this, it's pretty significant that a lot of these projects were done on shoestring budgets, that they were done with lacking resources. And so it really does say a lot about the people that do the research here and certainly our abilities. But I think another issue that we have to deal with is that dealing with time. A lot of us here wear a lot of hats at Palm Beach Atlantic. I mean, we think about what we're contracted to do, and that's to teach classes. And so looking at data that were collected or published in 2011, this was a study that was funded by a Quality Initiative grant, a study where Dr. Jokel from the English department and I decided to be sociologists and to study Christian higher ed. And so we launched a survey that picked the brains of about 1,900 faculty at Christian institutions around the country and about 2,400 students. And we asked them a myriad of questions, including that of what their workload looks like. And we can see that for Palm Beach Atlantic, we are contracted to do 4 classes, basically 12 contact hours per semester. And so we are on the higher end of the workload compared to other Christian schools. Other schools are teaching 3 or less classes per semester. So right off the bat, we have a heavier workload. Certainly we could see that the majority of faculty would agree they would welcome a course load reduction for the express purpose of doing research. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But right off the bat, our contractual obligations handcuff us as far as time. You put on top of that, I know a lot of us serve on committees. A lot of us might serve in the faculty senate. If you're, for example, in the Department of Biology, between 10 full-time faculty or so, we have over 300 advisees. So there's times of the year that we don't really have much time for anything. Add on top of that administrative duties, do something silly like become a department chair. You have very little time for anything. But certainly we know there's ways of getting around that. We can certainly bring work home, and we can try to compensate with that. But we know that if you keep bringing work home, you suddenly become very unpopular with your kids. You become very unpopular with your spouse. You become very unpopular with your pets. Simply something has to give. And we think about this issue of time. We do have to kind of take care of ourselves. It's certainly very easy to bring work home, but ulcers do not show up on your CV, right? When you turn in your faculty evaluation form, it doesn't tell you there isn't a line for how much stress that you had over the course of the year. It's up to us to strike that balance, to maintain our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health. Those are things that can easily fall by the wayside. We have to set boundaries. We have to know when to say no, because no one else will on our behalf. So, these are things that we need to consider when we are talking about research, especially an institution such as ours that's very heavily balanced towards teaching. So another thing that we can talk about is the perception of academic freedom. And this is kind of an interesting subject, especially when we did our survey on Christian higher ed, because the perception from the outside of Christian academia is that I think our colleagues from secular schools would think that we lack academic freedom. Just to show you some of the data, we could see that those that are within the trenches of Christian institutions, we're in pretty good agreement. We feel like we have very good academic freedom, all things considered. We could see that we're looking around 85% or so strongly or somewhat agree that we have academic freedom in Christian institutions. We could also see that some would say that over half that we have more freedom than those in secular institutions. And I think that's significant. We certainly know that as long as things are within the guiding principles, they are fair game. We need to keep in mind that all truth is God's truth. But we do hear it. I do have colleagues that work in state schools. They're like, you're in a Christian institution. You can't talk about evolution, things like that. And it got me thinking. I decided to do a little thought exercise here and do a comparison. Here we have Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, and we have my essay on evolution in Christian higher education. And looking at Darwin, he uses the word evolved once in the entire document of Origin of the Species. And if I look at my essay, I use it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and that's only on the first page. I haven't been fired. We'll see after this talk how that goes. But we have academic freedom here in Christian institutions. Again, we can tie things to our Creator. We can tie things to the fact that all truth is God's truth. And that's a luxury that we have that they don't have in secular institutions. And so I think that's a very positive thing, and that is a framework in which our research can certainly flourish. So certainly many might think that's an obstacle, but I think for us, it's certainly a very positive thing. So academic freedom. And another thing that people often put out there as an obstacle for doing research at an institution such as ours is that we lack graduate programs. And certainly a lot of us in here have been to graduate school. We remember what it's like being in those trenches. Sometimes you feel like an indentured servant. I see a lot of nods going on there. And the fact that we don't have graduate programs, I actually see as an asset. And I'm going to come back to this in just a few minutes. I think this is a positive thing that we have at PBA for us as faculty, but also for the students in the room as well. We'll come back to that in just a bit. So let's think about some of these positives. What are some of the positive things that we have going on here at Palm Beach Atlantic for doing research? And just to give a little insight to where these ideas came from, I was lucky enough to have some outside perspective on the nature of PBA from someone who doesn't work here, and that is my old major professor from the University of Florida, Clay Montague. He was doing some work on the island of Palm Beach, consulting for a beach renourishment project, and so he was spending some time here, visiting me on campus. He actually came by a few years back when we had one of the earlier Quality Initiative celebrations and got to see some of the research that we were doing here. Actually, there's a picture with him and Ray Waldner. If you can have two of your greatest professional influences in the Galapagos, I recommend that you do that. And so we had a lot of good time to sit back and talk about some of these things. And some of the things that he remarked, I think we don't appreciate when we're in the day-to-day grind of working at a place such as this, especially from him coming from a school such as the University of Florida, which is a very different animal than Palm Beach Atlantic. And one of the things that he noticed was this spirit of collaboration, this collegiality. The fact that I was able to do research with a colleague from the Department of English, that I was friendly and knew folks from ministry, from philosophy, from history, from other disciplines. Here he's, say at the University of Florida, he's lucky to know people who on the floor below him within the same department. But here we're able to foster these relationships that were, have these grounds that are very, very fertile for collaboration, very, very different from other institutions, and that's positive. And we also have these opportunities for development, things like the summer colloquium, the book club, the guided learning partnerships, so the Office of Faculty Development. This was an opportunity here where, for example, I took Dr. Templeton from education. We went out with her students and we towed for plankton to use that as part of elementary ed curriculum. Again, there are lots of opportunities where we can learn from one another, and you never know where that spark's going to come from. I mean, I can't say it enough how influential the faculty colloquia were with just getting ideas from colleagues from other departments, thinking about things very differently, going from a scientific perspective to a more philosophic, more humanities perspective, has worked wonders for my professional development and how I approach research. And those are things that we have here at PBA that's, I think, is fantastic. We also have that in-house research support. I already alluded to the increase of funds in the Quality Initiative Grant Program. The fact that we can get seed money for projects. A lot of these projects that we've been talking about were originally seeded by QI grants. Once you get the wheels going, you can then move on to other organizations and foundations to find other funding. But just the fact that we have this system where we can apply for in-house funds and employ students to work on those projects, I think that's an amazing opportunity that we have here. Also, course load reductions. We do have programs in place where you do have to apply for it. You can't do it every single year, but you can take a course or two off your load to help you concentrate on either starting projects or finishing up projects. And again, I think we sometimes underestimate how much effort needs to go into wrapping projects up. I have a lot of things that certainly are still simmering on the back burner that need to be wrapped up, but it's just finding that time. Again, I can't neglect my kids or wife or dog. And also another one we have is the Summer Undergraduate Academic Research Program, and this is a relatively new program. This has been started since the original talk in 2012. This provides stipends for faculty and students to do work during the summer, and a lot of these things have been significant and has resulted in quality publications and things like that. But what I want to focus on is student involvement. I think, again, we can look at the lack of graduate programs as a negative, but I think the fact that we can involve our undergraduate students is a huge positive that we have, both for us and also our students here at PBA. So let's start with an example. This is a campsite. This campsite is at Flamingo, which is on the southern tip of Florida in Everglades National Park. I've been taking students to Everglades National Park since 2003. As a matter of fact, I'm bringing another group of students there tomorrow as part of my Natural History of the Everglades class. Quite an adventure. You never know what you get. Again, that's the beauty of doing field work. And so lots of opportunities. We see things like wildlife. Look, Ma, there's a gator. There on the other slide, we have students getting to love parrotfighting. I don't think people love parrotfighting as much as they should. But there I'm giving them the opportunity to get up close and personal. And so there's a lot of opportunities to experience things in the natural world. And so, like camping, I think a lot of you probably camp in here. There's an image of Will in 2006 cooking food. This is the southern tip of Florida, so we are very far, about 50 miles from any stores, so we have to bring all of our food in. We have to store it in our tents. Those of you who've camped in Florida, as soon as the sun goes down, who shows up? Well, mosquitoes, but who else? The raccoons, right? The raccoons, right? They see you bringing food camping, that is mine. So, and this was pretty notorious in 2006. The raccoons will come, they try to get into tents. I found one, for example, a student of mine, she had a CD case. Back in the day, they used to put music on discs, and you had to carry a case around. And this raccoon took her case, and we had to chase the raccoon into the bushes to get the case back. Obviously, they can be very disruptive to a campground. But what's interesting, in 2008, the raccoons were gone. We did a little experiment. We put a piece of chicken out on a bench, and the chicken was not taken until the vulture showed up the next morning. Where'd they go? Well, that night, we found an 8-foot python outside the campsite. All right. So we start putting two together. Raccoons are gone, that's nice. Pythons have shown up, that's kind of a neat addition. But we got thinking, we wonder if there is a cause and effect. Do these pythons that are very notorious for eating small mammals, large mammals too, could they have a influence on the raccoons? So one of the students there, one of our alum, there's Josh Holbrook holding the head, and there I am holding the tail. You get the bite or the musk when you deal with pythons. And we were thinking about it and say, you know what, this would be an interesting study. So we applied for quality initiative funds. We did a comparative study between Everglades National Park and Corbett and realized that, yes, there was a statistically significant influence of pythons on mammals in the Everglades. And this was one of the first papers that was on this subject. This was actually cited when the Federal Fish and Wildlife issued a Lacey Act, basically a restriction on constrictor snakes. This spurred a lot of other studies. Again, this was done because of our interactions in the classroom, the funding available in-house from the Quality Initiative Program, and it produced a very significant paper. Here's a nice shot of Josh with one of our larger ones. This was a 14.5-foot python that we got through the process of this research. But the cool thing is this also introduced us to the next topic, looking at mangrove snakes. Again, research begats research. By doing things, you ask new questions, new experiences. You never know where your next project is going to come up. Again, the opportunity that we have with our undergraduate students, it's a very positive thing. Another example. Who's ever got this text? Am I the only one who ever got this? No? You're probably wondering what a tardigrade is, right? What's a tardigrade? Tardigrades are cute little guys. They're very small, about 1 millimeter. Also known as water bears. They're also known as moss piglets. That's a kind of a cute name for them. These actually were first described by a German pastor in 1773, a guy named J. Goes. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But he was one of the first ones to identify these organisms and name them. Basically, tardigrade means a slow stepper. So we look at this, that's an exciting text, right? It's all caps, lots of exclamation points. Why did I receive this? And the thing is, one of the things that we can't teach in our science labs is that research is trial and error. There is a lot of failure in doing research, right? When you do your Bio 1, Bio 2 labs, that stuff is already worked out. It's like doing a cookbook, right? These are your steps. This is where you're going to end up. Eureka. But real research is hypotheses blowing up in your face. It's taking one step forward and 4 steps backwards. And the excitement behind this was that there was a lot of failure. There was a lot of, I'm never going to find one of these things. I'm doing this subject, I'm doing this research on these group of organisms, and I haven't found one. And just that excitement, that eureka moment of, wow. Okay, and that's education, right? That is not just education for research, but that is education for the real world, right? That there is success, with this bit of perseverance. And of course, me being a typical professor, I can't show too much excitement. Yes, I expect to see some pictures, but there it is. Where's the tardigrade? There it is right there, right? Again, that is one of the cool things that we have here. So we think about research, sometimes you get publications, right? There's Hannah Boss. She worked on the mangrove snake project with me. She was a co-author on this paper. She's now at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Insert joke on snake handling if you care to there, but she's doing really well. We have Cecilia Crawford, who is finishing up her PhD at Eastern Carolina. She's one of the world's experts on fish acoustics, and she co-authored a paper with me and Dr. Waldner. Katie Swick, who's now a nurse. She worked on the seagrass project. And this is significant. When we wrote this paper in 2011, we had over 40% coverage of seagrasses in Lake Worth Lagoon. We found Lake Worth Cove to be the most biodiverse seagrass community in the Western Hemisphere. We did our survey a couple weeks ago, less than 2% coverage. So without that baseline data, we don't realize that our lagoon is in really big trouble. And we've been in a lot of conversation with the county and things like that. Again, start with a QI grant, funded by a community foundation grant, extremely important. So, but I think the most important thing, I know I'm low on time, but I started late because I didn't have anyone presenting me, Mentorship. These are one of the things that I think is extremely valuable that we can do here. And this ties into retention. And I think this is one of the things that's very cool about Christian higher education is that we have over 50% of the students that somewhat or strongly agree that there is a faculty member that they can associate as a mentor. Large university, I bet that number is probably like 5 or 10%, and those are the students that really seek it out. So this is something, we think about value. We think about our strategic plan. And I go, just like the billboard, I know you all think about the strategic plan every time you wake up in the morning. We could tie into these things, spiritual vibrancy, right? We could think about how many of the Proverbs are about seeking knowledge and acquiring wisdom. We think about this idea of mentorship. This is what's going to increase retention rates. This is going to improve academic performance. Talking about the example with the tardigrades, about doing real research, about having those moments, that optimizes our student engagement. That optimizes our relationships. We can think about bringing in more funding. We can increase the funding. Part of a larger grant, some of that money goes to pay for overhead. So, it all ties in. Research is a very important investment, not just for the institution, but for the students that we graduate and obviously the products that we produce. So, really quickly, a couple plugs. We have a couple posters back there with the Community Foundation grant looking at coastal organisms in Palm Beach County. We also have another project looking at salamanders in Appalachian caverns. And I know I'm out of time, so I'm just going to leave it there. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them or shoot me an email at that address there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Do I have time for a question, or we need to move on?
Probably move on.
All right. Well,
Just one.
one question. Hey, Dr.
Just a comment is that I wonder if we as a Christian institution and as the CCU in general could leverage this idea that we take a more holistic approach, we're more generalists, and that won't get you very far in the top tier academic journals, but there's still value in it.
Absolutely.
And maybe that hasn't been appreciated enough or promoted enough. But we really we can ask a wider set of questions because not everything is it's got a quantitative answer.
I agree. I completely agree with that statement. And I think that is something that we should put out there, something that we should publicize, something that we should let the public know when they're looking at value of what your tuition dollars go for and what the benefits are. I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Just a quick question. The Python that you were working with Josh Goldbrook, did that have anything to do with the event that they run every year now where they go in to catch the pythons and eliminate the threat?
That is a drop in the bucket. I think the first year they did it 3 years ago, they collected 60. This year they collected 100. Estimates go between 30,000 and 180,000 pythons in the Everglades area. So taking 60 out, it's more PR, it's more awareness. It's a fun thing that people talk about. But as far as controlling the population, it's more of kind of publicity, more of a fun event they put on. Dr. Heyman.
What does python taste like?
It's gamey. Yeah, it's not like lionfish where you can make a fishery out of it. It's very gamey. More likely to make boots and wallets. All right, folks, thanks for your time. Appreciate you being here.